Tenants and advocates are demanding that Minneapolis implement an eviction moratorium because it's cold. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the whole eviction moratorium nonsense. Now, I said a long time ago, the second they put these, eviction moratoriums into place, they were opening up the door to more of them being, thrown out there due to other issues that they deemed to be, public health problems. And they decided that now the cold is an issue in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Yeah, that's right. So apparently, for the entire existence of Minneapolis, it's been cold every single winter, but now it's a problem. Now we need an eviction moratorium because now the homeless, somebody might freeze to death, and they might become homeless, they might end up on the street, and then they might freeze to death, and that would be all the landlord's fault. At least that's what these advocates are saying. Okay, to me, it's a complete garbage argument. This is something that, places that, with cold climates, they've been dealing with this since the very beginning of their existence. People sometimes are going to get, cold. They're going to get cold, okay? And that's unfortunate. We cannot stop the eviction process because of that, because simply put, if we can't evict people during the winter, well, that's half the year gone, okay? They really want to tie our hands. And you see, I think I covered the city of Seattle actually already has a wintertime eviction protections in place for tenants for this very reason. This is the nonsense that we have to deal with, okay? And this could spread throughout the entire country. There's never a shortage of sympathy for, whatever little cause, progressive cause that they're trying to push. So, this is insane. Before I get into the article, though, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Do you think that it's a good idea to have an eviction moratorium or eviction protections for tenants because it's cold? Okay? Do you think that's a good idea? And does your city already have that? I know some do. Like I mentioned Seattle before. I don't know where else, but hey, if it's cold, that could be, a reason that we shouldn't be able to evict anybody. That's what their logic is. God, I mean, it's so frustrating. Imagine being a landlord in a place where this sort of stuff is happening. Not only that, but they were talking about implementing rent control in the city of Minneapolis as well. St. Paul already has rent control. So they're going down the wrong road and they're stripping landlords of their property rights. And I hate to see this happen to landlords anywhere. So anyway, let's get into the article. This article is coming from the MinnesotaPost.com, and it says, calls for eviction moratorium as temps fall to dangerous lows in Minnesota. When including comorbidities, temperatures below 32 degrees Fahrenheit have been found to increase unhoused people's overall risk of death by 84%. That risk rises to 321% when the temperature drops below 9 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, I like how they threw that in there. Well, when the temperature is below freezing, well, people are more likely to freeze to death. Well, really? Wow, I would have never figured that one out. So if Minnesota and Minneapolis is anything like where I live, okay, there are shelters here for the people just for these very specific reasons, right? But the people who choose on their own to not go to the shelters, well, guess what? They have to deal with the consequences, be it that they are cold or not, okay? And these ridiculous rules for evictions, that isn't going to change any of that. So anyway, let's get into the article and see what it says. Just yesterday, an encampment under the 35 West Bridge on 31st Street in Minneapolis was cleared by the Minnesota Department of Transportation. Witnesses said they saw workers moving people's belongings and around 20 propane tanks, which people use to fuel portable heaters to have heat in their tents, Southwest Voices reported. Temperatures are dropping at dangerous rates, which poses safety threats for the unhoused. A former University of Minnesota law student has some thoughts about what could help during the cold winter months. Almost 2 years ago, Daniel Suter wrote an article for the Minnesota Law Review expressing that the state should implement a winter eviction moratorium to solve the issue of cold related deaths and injuries among the unhoused populations. Suter still holds his stance on the issue, and he says the laws put in place during the pandemic, like the COVID-19 eviction moratoriums, can improve outcomes. Well, you know what? I think this is not the. I mean, he's looking at the wrong issue, okay? If the issue is that these people are freezing to death, right, because you're basically sitting out in the cold, trying to live in a tent when it's like -10 outside, right? Well, that isn't an issue that has to do with the eviction moratorium, okay? These two things, they're trying to conflate two separate issues altogether. The people who are unhoused like that, the people who are unwilling to go to a shelter, well, they have their reasons, be it they don't like following the rules, or they want to continue to commit crimes and use drugs, etc., or they have just mental health issues, right? And so these people, they're different than the people who become homeless because of financial issues or whatever. Okay, so the people who are facing financial issues, like you lost your job, you couldn't pay your rent, and now you couldn't afford anywhere to live. Well, those people are the type of people who will go to the shelter and have no problem, at least staying warm all winter. Okay, these are two different groups of people. It's hard to think that, hey, well, homeless is home. No, homeless. There's different types of homeless people. There's the people who are temporarily homeless. There's people who are long-term homeless. There are people who are, homeless but stay with friends or family. There are people, or there are people who couch surf, etc. Right? And then there's the homeless people who just live on the streets and sleep on a mattress in a tent or something. You know what I mean? So the groups aren't exactly the same thing, and I wish they would clarify a little bit more when they make these rules. Suter now works at Homeline, a nonprofit statewide tenant advocacy organization that provides free and low-cost legal assistance, education, and advocacy services. It's got really cold, and it's just a lot of evictions in Minnesota right now, Suter said. I think a lot about how I talk to people all day at Homeline who are being evicted, and they say, where am I going to go? I have nowhere to go. It's cold. Okay, listen, man. Okay? If the conditions were different than they have been since the very beginning, when they founded the city of Minneapolis, or they founded any city throughout the entire country where it's cold, like it's cold here in Omaha, Nebraska. It's been cold since the city was founded. Every single winter, it's cold. Okay, so it's not like it's suddenly, oh, well, the people were fine and then it became cold for the first time ever in history. No. Okay? People know how to deal with this stuff. We have services set up. We have resources for those people. If they choose, like I said, it's on them. If they choose not to go to the shelters, if they choose not to utilize those resources, it's on them. Okay? So far in 2022, there have been 1,340 evictions in Hennepin County, a 234% difference from last year. With rising evictions, more people are seeking emergency shelter. The latest Hennepin County shelter report shows 238 families living in shelters as of December 9th, an increase of 255% from the same time the previous year. They throw those stats out there, right? And I like to look at the stats and see what they really say. They say there have been 1,340 evictions in Hennepin County, right? Which is a 234% increase. But keep in mind, there were a lot more eviction protections last year due to all that pandemic nonsense that they had in place, right? So obviously the number of evictions this year was going to be much higher. The real question is, how does that compare to 2019 before the pandemic, okay? Then it says that they show 238 families living in shelter as of December 9th, right? So 238 families are living in the shelter. So, those people who are living in the shelter, well, they don't have to worry about the cold because, the shelter has heat. Okay? Now, I know that might not be compassionate. Oh yeah, they also don't mention of those 238 families, how many of them were evicted? Okay, how many of them were evicted before they became homeless? And the studies that I've seen show that a minuscule number of people who are, in these homeless shelters, I think it was like less than 5% when they actually looked at the statistics for New York City. Less than 5% of the people in the shelter were in there because they had been evicted. So, that tells you that the other 95% are, are really the ones who you need to be focusing on, right? Because evictions are not a major cause of people being homeless, or at least being homeless inside the homeless shelter. Minnesota already has some laws to preserve tenant safety during winter months. The cold weather rule protects people from having their heat source permanently disconnected from October 15th through April 15th if they can't pay their utility bills. The rule prevents companies from disconnecting utilities for customers whose household income is at or below 50% of the state median income, right? Most places have this same rule. And I mean, I've seen it before, and unfortunately, I've also seen cases where landlords end up stuck with their past bills. Okay, so the rule is what the rule is, but at least we know that the government, they're taking the L on that one. If they say, hey, we're going to leave your heat on, they're taking the L and not the individual private business owner. So yeah, I don't agree with these advocates who think that we shouldn't be able to evict people during the winter months. I really don't. Okay, I don't think it's going to have the effect that they think it will, and I don't think that the people who they think they're going to be helping are even going to be helped by such a rule or such a law.